super excited to have Kimberly. I've been following Kimberly for many years now, and I think what she's sharing in the world is super relevant for this time. And I'm over the moon to be having this conversation. So thank you for being here today, Kimberly. So Kimberly is an award-winning sacred feminine activist and soul midwife. 20 years helping awakening women rebirth the feminine in themselves, their lives, and the world. Kimberley Jones is a spiritual mentor and wise woman who's come from a long lineage of intuitives and seers. Following her mother's passing in 1997, she experienced transformational mystical awakenings, initiating her as a feminine mystic, here to channel and share deeply rooted divine medicine for our awakening world. She was awarded Lightworker of the Year by Lightworker magazine, voted in the top 50 women's empowerment blogs, voted one of the top influencers in human potential on Twitter, and has her extraordinary journey of awakening featured in several books, as well as being the subject of psychological, paranormal, and spiritual research worldwide. Coming from a long line of highly intuitive, clairvoyant, and clairsentient women, Kimberly is described as a real-life spirit guide and a soul midwife for our awakening world. Yay!
Blimey, that'll sum it up. Thank you, love. Thank you.
So tell us, I want to hear more about what led you to do the work that you do today. I really would like to hear more about your story.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned in the intro, I come from a long line of intuitives, empaths, clairvoyants. Grew up watching my mum read tarot and my grandnan teach her how to read tea leaves. But I was very aware from a really young age that there was a lot of fear around their gifts. They were reluctant to be open about it. It was all behind closed doors. My mum was the local hairdresser. When she had children, she moved her business from home. So I grew up with a house full of mainly women coming and going, sitting in a chair, my mum doing their hair, but being the counsellor, as many hairdressers are, great listeners, great counsellors. And she was bringing that mediumistic and that spirituality, those gifts to that job as a hairdresser. So I saw and sensed her doing that work. But her message to me was always, it's a curse, it's not a blessing. I don't want you to do this work. I don't want, it was drummed into me all through my childhood, even though I was seeing spirits myself, communicating with other realms from a really young age, reading people's energy, knew what people were thinking and feeling from a really young age. And so fast forward a few years, she became really unwell and she lived with cancer for 11 years. And when she sadly died in 1997, a few weeks later, I had what I now know is actually quite common in lineages of certain types of clairvoyance and mediums. I had an ancestral download of unused gifts, suppressed power, but it was all mixed in with the grief, the loss, trauma that I didn't know that I had at the time from childhood, abuse, and the collective trauma that we're all becoming more aware of. And so that download triggered a Kundalini crisis, a spiritual emergency, a sudden awakening, a dark night of the soul, and ultimately just a complete breakdown of my life, massive transformation. And at the time, I had no context for that kind of process, so I didn't know what was happening. So as a result, I lost my job. Then my partner lost his job, lost my home, moved house several times. Bit by bit, my body also started to break down, and I became immobilized and really unwell. And it took a couple of years for that steady decline, and the doctors didn't really know what was going on. I was very careful, actually. I was guided very strongly by spirit not to reveal too much of the more extreme experiences that I was having to the doctor. I didn't know why at the time. I understand why now. I was told it was a spiritual experience. Trust the process. Trust the process. But there I was in my late 20s, out of work, sick, in bed most of the time, lost my mum, thinking I'm going crazy. And I was flicking through a local Mind, Body, Spirit magazine and found a healer that was nearby, a Reiki healer. I'd never heard of Reiki then, 1999 this would have been. And I had that first Reiki session and everything changed. Almost overnight, everything changed. So I went from this darkness, this fear, and I describe it as the moment my world went pink, because the divine feminine energy came in really strongly through the healing. I didn't really know what that meant then, but the healer said that she'd had this huge visitation from this divine feminine gathering of deities, of female deities, as she was preparing to do my healing. And my experience, I think, was that energy coming in for me from that moment onwards, and sort of setting me on that path. Again, I didn't really have the language for it then. I didn't know that was some kind of sacred feminine awakening or whatever. It was just that the air went pink and I felt different, and I started to get better. And as many people watching will probably relate to, from that moment on, it was just this kind of synchronistic free fall of magical books being lent to me and finding my way to the next teacher. And I ended up training with a Canadian shaman and learning how to really manage my energy and master my energy, and working with, because I was telepathic, I had remote viewing, I was astrally traveling, I was lucid dreaming, but it was all spontaneous. So she helped me sort of discipline that. Yeah. And then by 2004, I was ready to set up in private practice, working in a complementary therapy centre that was run by a doctor at the time, doing Reiki and intuitive guidance. And I realised I was seeing things in women's energy and common themes. Tens of thousands of women in the end, and observing common themes in this process of awakening, embodiment, and identifying various feminine wounds that were stored in the body that were manifesting as holding them back in their lives. And for various reasons, I left the clinic and started working from home online, and so then everything expanded to more of a global reach. And then I had a few years off for health reasons, and now I'm being called back out again, so that brings me to now.
Yeah, well, and that kind of leads me into my next question, because one of the main things that I see you working with and what's coming through is you talk a lot about sacred feminine activism. So what is that? And like, I mean, there's so many layers, and we can go into that as it comes in, but tell us more about that and what you see, how you're working with that and sharing.
It's been a process. Yeah, it's been a process, and the wording came in as an offering in the last few months, and it was really a grounding process and a clarification of what my work has always been. Because I tend to live into the experience and be guided by spirit, and then I can make sense of it with language and the intellect later on. Yeah. So that's what's happened, is it's kind of dropped in and made sense of what my work has been so far and what my work will be going forward. So up until now, it's been very much about that personal level of empowering women on a one-to-one basis, healing their own feminine wounds and supporting them on their process of awakening and coming down into the body and feeling what's there to be felt, connecting with their gifts, their purpose, their pain. And in these times, it makes perfect sense that has shifted and expanded now for me into more of a collective global perspective of us living in the death throes of patriarchy now. And this message that I keep getting now is to gather all of that experience, all of those tools, and all of that wisdom that all of the women that have been working on themselves and healing and awakening these past years, and bringing them together in a really focused way to get ready.
Mm.
And so I was asking, get ready for what, you know, and it's to midwife or hold space for this, for the crumbling of patriarchy, and
Beautiful.
then midwife the return of the goddess,
Mm.
and the return of the values and the ideals and the way of being and the way of living, community, social justice, equality, compassion, sacred ritual, connection to the land, connection to the divine, sitting in circle. So bringing all that personal healing and growth and awakening that we've been doing now in service in a wider way, beginning with personal leadership, of course, embodying it and living it, but then looking at, okay, how can we get ready in the coming years to really serve? Because when patriarchy crumbles, it's going to leave one heck of a vacuum.
Yeah.
And we know nature abhors a vacuum. And I feel women are being prepared. Women, those who identify with women and those who carry this feminine energy, it's not necessarily specific to gender, but it tends to be those who've embodied as women who are carrying these codes of this next age, or the feminine leadership, goddess culture in this next age. Yeah, there's so much more to it, but that's kind of where I'm at with it at the moment, because I'm really aware that I'm birthing it now. You know, it's coming through me, and every day I'm getting other bits dropping in, and it's unfolding and evolving. And I'm not an expert in any one of the areas that are being presented to me, but I'm birthing it, and I'm open to learning and growing and seeing how sacred feminine activism is intersectional. I'm really at the beginning of unpacking my white privilege and exploring how this sacred feminine path fits into that bigger picture.
Beautiful. When you said this, it is exciting, and it's very much also in line with what I'm birthing here, like why we're here together, because there is this calling to come together collectively, and then us as like the way showers or the people coming first to kind of really embody that sacred feminine. So then again, like you say, as we are just leading the way, and we're going to be ready when we're called to. Yeah, it's beautiful. So thank you for doing the work you're doing. It's really important. And we talked, you mentioned it a little bit, but about the feminine wound. So you talk a lot about working with women in feminine wound, and there's so many layers to that. And so what are some of the layers and wounds that you see having in women, and what would you, how would you lead women into, or share with them to start this journey, to start healing the wounds that many have, that we have?
Well, I'm really committed to teaching from my own experience and being rooted in what I know authentically from my own lived experience. So there are amazing women out there working with all sorts of different elements of the feminine wound and the feminine wounds. The ones that I've experienced are to do with what again, it came in from spirit about 22 years ago. I've named the witch wound.
Yeah.
Excuse me, a lot of people know me from that work.
That's actually that's how I found you, was the healing the witch wound. Yeah.
Okay. And of course, as I shared at the beginning, I realized I kind of grew up in a cauldron of the witch wound, in a soup of the witch wound, with my mum being afraid of her gifts, with my nan, her mum, very much afraid and completely trying to block and suppress her gifts, and my grandnan as well, behind closed doors, yes, but all three of them I witnessed experiencing abuse of different kinds, or knew of them experiencing abuse of different kinds, because of their power and because of their ability to read their husbands and read their energy, and so I grew up in that. So it was very familiar to me. I didn't have a language for it then, though. It was just in me. I could feel it. And then when I started working with women in the clinic that I mentioned, and scanning their energy fields, there was one pattern that kept coming up, and it seemed to surface just as they were about to step up, or asking questions about what's my purpose, or they wanted to write a book, or they'd had an invitation to speak, or something that was really moving them to the next step in their growth and breaking out of the life that they'd been living, a growth moment. And they would often come to me saying the same things: I feel stuck, I feel blocked, I get so far and I can't go any further, or this fear comes up, or I feel this constriction around my throat and I can't speak, just this dread, this fear, almost fear of death. And they would say it feels completely irrational. They thought they were crazy, but it felt like they were going to die if they stepped up. And I know it's a common, one of the top 5 strongest fears, I believe, you know, public speaking, or stepping up to speak. But even if it didn't involve speaking, it might involve them writing a book, or opening to their intuitive gifts, and maybe doing readings for friends, and this kind of thing. And over time, as I was scanning the energy fields intuitively, I get downloads of information about what's stored in that part of the body. And sometimes it's to do with an event in this lifetime, an injury from the past. But what was happening is that the information that was coming, or being shown to me in women's bodies, was getting much deeper, going much deeper than that. And it was touching on past lives, it was touching on collective consciousness and shared experiences. And many of them in the healing room with me were starting to have flashbacks and memories of burning alive, or being hanged, or being killed, and the burning times of the witch trials and so on. So that's how that journey of awareness began, and it just became another rich resource, healing resource, validating resource, when I was working with awakening women, even after I stopped doing the energy work, in doing readings and in mentoring. It became a really significant key to unlock a big piece of a woman's embodiment and awakening, and stepping into their gifts and into their power. And of course, the crumbling of patriarchy, for me, represents a major turning point in the healing of that.
Yeah.
Because the witch wound isn't just of those times. The witch wound presents itself in many areas of society now that affect women now. You know, healthcare, for example, you know, up until recently, and it still happens, but up until recently, there wasn't even awareness in mental health system of what spiritual experiences were. It was instantly pathologized as a mental illness. And then our mystics, our awakening mystics, end up misdiagnosed, often, not always, but misdiagnosed and medicated, and that process gets interrupted. Yeah. And I have experience of friends and clients who had that witch wound surface. They broke through that fear and decided to get support for these sometimes unmanageable awakenings that they were having, and ending up then within the mental health system. And you know, so many of my friends work in the mental health system, and they're very passionate and very well-meaning and absolutely want to help. There's never any intentional harm, I'm well aware of that. But sometimes the consequence, as I've seen it, of awakening women ending up in the mental health system and having these awakenings and these spiritual mystical experiences medicated, suppressed, pathologized, misunderstood, completely invalidated, is so violent and so harmful. And so as the years have gone on, I've just observed how that witch wound has filtered into consciousness and shown up in lots of different areas of society that make it difficult for awakening women, mystical women, intuitive women to speak out, or dare to even express that they have these gifts. I mean, in religious communities, in church communities as well, for example, I've witnessed that in my own experience of different modern versions of persecution and judgment and being shut down. And it's a biggie. It's one of the big wounds. Yeah.
And I find for myself, I've been working on many different layers of it. And so like even just birthing in this this gathering, and I was like, there was these moments where I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe to be able to share and do this. And then I had to sit with that, because that's obviously, it's not present day time that I'm feeling that. That's definitely coming from the past, and a collective, or an individual past life thing. But yeah, it's huge, and it can be subtle the way it plays out in your life, and unless you're doing the work, you wouldn't know that this is affecting you. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any other like feminine wound layers that that come, or a common theme in women that you work with?
Well, I distill it down to three things: bitch, witch, whore.
That's great.
So you get the gist. You get the gist. If you've got boundaries and you're powerful, you're a bitch.
Mm.
Yeah, you get the message. Yeah, mystical, intuitive, you're the witch. If you're in your sexual power, you're the whore. I know there are different interpretations of whore in spiritual circles as well. Some great and healthy, and some not so great and healthy. So yeah, it's about reclaiming those words really, and reclaiming those powers, which are very much about the sacred feminine, owning our sexuality, owning our sexual power, sensual power, reclaiming it from patriarchy, and turning our bodies and our sexuality into a commodity. Yeah, reclaiming that. So that's a biggie.
Yeah, so much depth there in those things, and so much that my son is
a little one. Yeah,
my son is waking up. I think he's having a little bit of a dream. We'll try to keep going. We might have to stop in a moment. Oh, poor little guy. He just had a little night terror. You know, they don't know that they're just dreaming and they're awake and they're crying but they're not really awake. Okay. So we were talking about the healing journey. Like, so how do we start going on that healing journey to heal, like whether it's the witch wound or any of these wounds? What do you suggest for us?
Well, I mean, what's coming is to talk about the fact that a lot of women find their way to me ready to really heal those feminine wounds when they hit burnout.
Yeah.
And they realize they've been running on that masculine energy, but the unhealthy masculine energy, I should say. They've been running on that way of being that we learned in our patriarchal culture. That to thrive, you act a certain way, and so it's very often about making them aware of that, or helping them to see that there's another way, that it's okay to break the rules and be different and live a different way that works for you, rather than works the way the outside world tells you to.
Yeah.
So very often it can be initially about just noticing that, and noticing that the way that your life is set up might not be working for you. A lot of women that come to me and they mirror, of course, what my own path has been. So they're often burnt out because they've been overgiving, people pleasing, self-abandoning, putting other people's needs and wants before their own, often not even knowing what they want, living so outside of themselves, out of their body, that the place to go to connect with your needs, wants, desires, there's a disconnect. I had the same experience. I remember probably about around 2000, the Canadian shaman that I was living with and working with and training with, she just did a big pattern interrupt on me when we were talking about something else, and she just lasered in on me and said, "What do you want?" You know, and it stayed with me for days, and I remember just bursting into tears, because it wasn't even that I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted, but that wasn't what I was upset about. What I was upset about was that I couldn't find the place in me to go to find out. I wasn't connected to myself at all. There was no pathway back to answer that question. So that one question at that one perfect moment showed me that I'd lost myself. I'm not even sure I'd ever found myself. I grew up being trained to be that people pleaser and that overgiver in service of everybody else's needs and feelings. and it's a work in progress. I'm still noticing and fine-tuning and learning and growing all the time. So very often those are the things that come up first. And then, okay, so how do I get back in? How do I reconnect with myself? So very often it's about slowing down, noticing what isn't working. Where are the points of friction and tension and overwhelm in your life? Whether it's childcare, whether it's the hours you're working, the job you're doing, your relationship, saying yes when you really want to say no to social obligations or family commitments, or, you know, those sorts of levels of coming back to yourself. And then of course there are shamanic and energy skills and things that we can do, but it very often just starts with an audit of whether you're pleasing others or pleasing yourself, and what makes you happy and what's burning you out and what's exhausting you and what needs to change, what you know needs to change, not what someone else is telling you needs to change. And then it's a slowing down, it's a redesigning. If you were starting to shift pieces of your life based on what actually serves you, and realizing that in doing that you serve the rest of your community, your family, so much more powerfully. But that reconnecting and that coming home to yourself and coming back into the body very often just starts with slowing down, simplifying, even like decluttering your wardrobe, things like this. But it's slowing down, it's simplifying, it's starting to say no, it's creating space for yourself to be, so that you can listen to how you feel. You create a space between the stimulus and the response. You create a gap. You slow everything down. For some people, meditation is a great tool that creates that gap, so that you've got a pause moment. You don't automatically respond and say yes. You take a moment to check in. Actually, do I want to do that? No, I don't. Why am I saying yes? I really, and why am I friends with that person? They're just so draining and toxic. And it's just being honest and having a check-in. And then there are deeper steps, like spending more time in nature, having some skin-to-skin contact with nature as much as you can, even if you've only got a house plant, sit by it, breathe, be, connect with it. Preferably get out in as big a nature as you can, kicking off your shoes, and earthing and connecting, and that shifts your energy, it shifts everything, starts to slow everything down. And then you start to be guided, you start to become receptive, you start to open to being shown and being led. So, I mean, when people say, can you help me connect with my intuition? I mean, sure. I mean, there are so many skills to, connect with your third eye, but for me, the deepest, most sustainable, grounded, reliable source of intuition comes from deep within, from the heart, from the womb, from the body, from the earth, from spirit. And so there's often quite a bit of work to do to get to a place of receptivity, so that you can open to your intuition. Again, it's been a bit of I've observed what you might call masculine or quite patriarchal processes to kind of force the intuition to open, the third eye to open. Again, it's still up at the head level. So a lot of it is helping women come back to themselves, permission to come back to, so I call it selfhood, being selfish in that healthy way that helps you serve others in a wider way, selfhood. And then moving on to reclaiming your power and using deeper tools to reclaim lost bits of yourself and life force that's being siphoned off, or that you've lost in trauma, or that you've just been conditioned to give away in this society. And that disconnecting from external power sources and becoming your own source, through your own heart, through your own body, to the earth beneath you, to source above you. And that's the sovereignty phase, if you like, that people call the sovereignty phase. So that's some ways. But it's a process, I'm sure you can feel it's an ongoing process.
It's always a journey, and there's always you just said so many beautiful things that I think all of us can really relate to, like that people pleasing, the giving of our energy, that, working in the masculine, and how much that actually does burn that out. Like I've been talking about slowing down, and then just recently, like during the lockdown COVID period, was when I like truly slowed down. And this is when like some serious deep healing happened for me. And it is just that reconnection to ourself. And that's when the intuition does come out. And it is really, and then like you say, reclaiming the power. But it all kind of comes, and there's always the layers, and like little, we just go a little here and here and just build our way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, and the world has got really loud and really fast. And if there is a gift in this awful situation, it's that a lot of people have had that chance to experience what we might call a more feminine way of being, slowing down, connecting to what really matters to you, spending time perhaps with the people that matter to you or not, which is a great sadness for many, I know. But it's that slowing down and having quiet time. And so many people that are very sensitive and intuitive and empathic are finding the news and social media so overwhelming and overstimulating and negative right now, and fear-based, that they are making the choice, some of them for the first time, making the choice to switch off the news, to come off social media. And of course that allows our nervous system to calm, and the chatter and the noise and all that psychic deluge to quieten for a while, which helps us connect to our inner knowing and our intuition.
And I want to come like tap into that inner knowing, because it's kind of, we've talked about this, but like this remembering of who we are, and this reconnecting to like ancestral roots and indigenous ways. So it's like we're kind of coming in this, you talked about like stepping back into the goddess times, but it's kind of like a full circle back into what we already kind of know it's within us. So like talk more about that, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, you can go seeking for it, of course, if it calls to you and it shows up in your experience that that's something you want to go and explore. Then there are the external ways of exploring it. We can research, our family line. We can look into what the indigenous spirituality is and was on the land where we live, or the land where we were born. That's a beginning. That's a powerful beginning. What I've noticed in myself and in the people that I work with very much, it's this kind of what you're drawn to. So they start to be drawn to herbalism or witchcraft or Wicca, or more pagan or other pagan traditions, or the feeling of priestesshood is what really resonates, or shamanism. So again, I really encourage people generally in my work to come from the inside, if you're called to. I mean, I wouldn't have been particularly interested 15, 20 years ago necessarily I was an ungrounded, traumatized light worker that was operating out of my body, very comfortable in the cosmic spiritual realms, because I felt safe and it was close to home, true home. And I remember some of just the earlier meditations in some of the circles I sat in that were encouraging me to plant my roots deep in the earth and connect with my ancestors. And I was so freaked out. It felt so, because there's that resistance in the embodiment. There's that resistance to ground. There's that resistance to embody. And so it can take time to get to the point where you're grounding that light down and through over a period of your healing, dropping in more and more and more. And then for me, the experience was when I dropped into my lower chakras, started healing some of that sexual wounding in sacral and the root, and that this phase of my life and work opened up. So it didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. It felt like a very natural next step to, and was drawn to re-engage with shamanism and earth-based traditions, and just this last weekend, actually, I did a weekend medicine woman training with a shaman, and it was just amazing. And I was in the experience, and it was the right moment, and I was just fully in it, fully in my body, in that juicy, I could feel my ancestors, I could feel tribal energy, I could feel, and I was ready to connect with that. I was ready to embody it. But a few years ago, no chance. So very often it's about timing and what you're called to.
Yeah.
Because as I say, you know, 15, 20 years ago, my community, some of my peer group and my clients were definitely much more kind of cosmic, galactic, that crew that I adore and love. And now I'm moving into more of an understanding or an exploration of that ancestral lineage. And shamanism is one of the ways that you can access that in a really direct way. You know, it's one of the oldest spiritual, earth-based spiritual traditions that exists. The original, if you like, you know, the natural way of being on the land and with the land, and connecting with the web of life and rooting it all in our bodies. And we had the most beautiful experience of connecting to, or I had the most beautiful experience of connecting to my ancestral line and stepping into them and stepping into them and stepping into them, and kind of gathering the gifts and releasing the wounds. And I would say let yourself be guided and shown and see what you're called to. But there are all kinds of fun ways now that I'm looking forward to exploring, like this DNA thing you can do and find out where your DNA comes from in the world. I'm looking forward to doing that, you know, just for fun, see what that brings up. But again, I'm like, okay, well, that could initiate shifts for me in some way. Who knows? Give me some extra pieces of myself to go and explore and reclaim. But ultimately, it's led from within, when the timing's right. Yeah.
So it's really about like doing all those things that you were talking about, like getting back into the body. I think is so important. Like you've talked about that a lot, because I think from the beginning, like if we experience trauma from a young age, we disconnect from the get-go. And then we just spend all our time out disconnected to, you know, and when you don't really feel at home here on Earth. And you're like you said, I'd rather be up in the galactic or be in my but it's so important to get into the body and get grounded. And this is where the healing happens.
The people I work with, I refer to them as top downers.
Top downers.
Yeah, because there are loads of like amazing, I affectionately refer to them as muggles, who want to open and explore the finer, higher frequencies and spiritual awakening and spiritual awareness. And that's, I see just in an energy flow way, that's a sort of a bottom up journey. And so most of the people that I work with tend to be on this top down journey of embodying that light, grounding that light. And I did it too. I mean, I was still up here and I was like, I want to save the world. What do I do? Okay, there's a bit of work to do first, love, you know.
Like me.
If you want to influence the world, you want to affect the world, you've got to be in it first, right?
And then I mean, we really still have to keep going on our own healing journey too. We have to keep embodying the practice and just keep doing our own inner work. It never really stops.
There's no end point, is there? It's never end.
Another layer to peel. You talk a lot about like sacred union within. So you do talk more about that. I mean, it's a big topic.
It is a big topic, but it's part of the process, because, you know, we heal the feminine wounds and we start that inner relationship between our inner masculine and feminine. So a lot of women find their way to me, as I mentioned, in burnout, because they've been running on an unhealthy masculine energy template way of being. And so as you start healing that and running on feminine fuel instead, you can start healing your inner relationship between the masculine and the feminine. And I mean, the deepest expression of that is embodying the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, embodying a connection with the divine inside your own skin. So ultimately that's the sacred union that I talk about, that sacred union within. And very often it's people that are called to or attracted to the twin flame information that end up finding their way to me in that work, because they're feeling that longing, they've had that activation, that awakening, they're feeling that heartbreak of homesickness and that disconnection from source, and seeking to fill that with another person. That other person is often the catalyst for that inner healing. And it my particular path is to help mainly women, or those who are holding the feminine piece of the puzzle, to look at those issues of codependency, look at the homesickness, look at everything we've shared, those patterns, those wounds that have them perhaps seeking to fill that wound and that emptiness, that void, that longing from another person. Of course it can also show up as addictions, that filling the void with various other things, but on this topic it tends to be a counterpart, a person that shows up as an intense soul, often obsessive, very powerful connection, but I think with the right guidance, that experience can be transformed into something incredibly positive and lead someone to that experience of selfhood, sovereignty and sacred union within themselves. So it's not about the other person, it's not about this romanticized Hollywood ideal of what love is. It's on a soul level, those beings often come into our lives to lead us back to ourselves, to lead us back to source within and sacred union within. And then from that place of fullness, I'm still working on this myself, yes, that from that place of fullness and that inner well and that inner chalice, that sacred feminine chalice being full to overflowing, from that place then we can perhaps seek a soul, or attract a healthy soulful connection. And for some people, actually, the journey of getting to that place of fullness is by having lots of, and a huge part of my journey has been about having lots of different relationships and learning really big painful lessons in each one of them. And if I come out of victimhood, and hating them, then I can return to a place of really being empowered and seeing that each one of them served my soul growth in a particular way, and each one of them has played a role in leading me towards this path of sacred union within myself, where I get to experience glimpses of, and eventually, who knows, a complete experience and embodiment of that love, that belonging, that peace, that urge to merge with the divine and have that intense connection, but have it in my own skin, in my own body, and not need someone else to give that to me. And then I can share that with someone else.
So important, so beautiful. I feel very just when you talk about it.
I know, I just want to hang out in that now.
It just feels so nice. Beautiful. Again, that is a journey. Like, we're just always learning. Like, and what I really liked what you said, and I think maybe we can chat about that a bit more, is like using life and our life experiences as opportunities for growth. But it's so easy to get caught in victimhood mentality. That's, you kind of so it's like recognizing all our life experiences as a way to just connect with ourselves. So maybe you want to talk more about that?
See, my experience as well is, because people say often, don't they, oh, it happened for a reason, and you can turn this into gold, and that's true. But my experience has been slightly different, and it feels more like I just have a knowing, or a deep understanding, a knowing that everything that's happened in my life, and my life has been a soap opera on steroids, and everything not in the moment always, but certainly for more than half of my life, there's this higher, deeper kind of awareness perspective that I trust what's unfolding, that sometimes as it's happening, that it's not that I make sense of it afterwards, or that I try and turn it into something that helps me grow afterwards. It's an awareness in the process that this is a sacred experience. Even the darkest, most painful is some kind of sacred initiation. And that doesn't leave me, even when I think it's left me, even when I want to throw my toys out the pram and say, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't go for this again. I'm not working for you. That kind of separation awareness. But there's a trust. It's not even faith. It's a knowing, and it's a trust. And if I didn't have that, then I would be rolling through, and it does come up in small ways, but I would be rolling through definitely more martyrdom, victimhood, feeling helpless, feeling powerless, as so many people do now. So there's something about having that big picture awareness that really helps hold you when the shit hits the fan. And also something I'm just learning now is how to really take care of myself, and how to resource myself, how to take care of my nervous system, how to do, when I have the quiet, graceful periods of my life, it's like, that's the time to do the work. Whereas previously, that was the time when I was like cruising. I was like, okay, this is a good phase. Don't need to do the work, And then I start getting triggered, and then something happens, and I've been knocked off my perch again, and find my way back. So that's what's coming in response to this question as well, is let's use this time to, even though this is not necessarily what you might call a graceful time, but for some people, they're not working, they're at home. Let's use this time to learn how to build your inner resources and get resilient and get rooted, so that we can weather whatever might come. Develop those inner skills. And the slowing down, I think, like we said before, it can help you access that inner knowing and that inner space and the intuition, and perhaps that broader big picture awareness. I mean, so many people are waking up now, so it gives you a really different perspective on the things that happen in your life, to have that broad view, and to know that this is a moment in a much bigger journey of the evolution of human consciousness. In the big scheme of things, this 2,000-3,000 years of patriarchy is relatively small. And I firmly feel we're heading somewhere good. But like any birthing process, there are those labor pains, and it's the mantra that's been given to me from Spirit all along is trust the process. Just as you trust the seasons. We don't all go into mourning when the leaves fall off the trees. Oh my God, the world has ended. We trust the process. Same with, I haven't given birth to children. I haven't physically given birth to children, but many people in my life have, and have shared their experience with me, and I've witnessed and been a birthing partner, and the miracle of that, trusting the process and trusting the body. And even when it's really painful and frightening sometimes for some people, there's something miraculous at the end of it. So there's that breathing through the and the beautiful naming of this gathering as well, birthing in a new earth. Trust the process, keep breathing.
Yes, I like that. Taking it on board.
I'm saying it for myself as well. I'm saying it for myself.
I think we all need, that's a good mantra for all of us. Yeah, so we can kind of wrap it up now, but it's like, so as you said, we are starting to see the crumbling of patriarchy. So we're kind of just, I mean, maybe it's been building up for a while, but so what is it that's like, what is your message to the audience, and like how we can really tap into birthing in a new earth and getting ready for this time?
Hmm. Well, a summary of what we've shared, I think, really is first of all, trusting yourself, trusting the bigger process.
Mm.
That this isn't a random event. You know, it's a long prophesied phase, transformational phase on the human journey. And everyone that's here at this time is here to play a role.
Mm.
On a personal level, I would say it's about learning how to get really grounded and really rooted and really earthed and really centered and really calm, and how to process your emotions, how
Mm.
to create space between the trigger and your reaction, how to create that space, slow down. We've got enough reaction going on in the world, and particularly for women, really dropping into your body and listening to yourself and trusting yourself, really taking good care of yourself. So many women are going to be called into leadership to create the new world and create the new systems. There's a real feeling of needing to be ready. For a lot of women, it will be doing what they're already doing and raising good families and raising conscious children, you know. So there's that inner piece, you know, there's that family bit and the local community bit, because the feminine leadership and going forward, it's very much from the inside out. Feminine leadership is from the inside out. So it's how we manage our own inner emotions and mindsets moment to moment. It's not about being perfect. It's not about not feeling anything. It's how we navigate those things and how we love ourselves, how we hold ourselves, how we return after periods of activity and service and giving and coping with the chaos, and how we come back into resource, learning to flex that muscle of coming back into resource and get resilient and rooted. I think those are going to be key skills going forward.
Beautiful. Well said. I think that's really, I think that's, yeah, you kind of just encapsulated it all. And yeah, really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, for being here today and for all that you're doing in the world, and, you know, and helping, preparing us, like you're preparing, like the leaders, preparing us to bring birth in this new earth. And yeah, I really appreciate your work and honor you in your path, and thank you. And if you want to know more about Kimberly, check her website out. She's got, you do doing one-on-one sessions. Like I've just recently done a tarot reading with her, which was really amazing. So her work is amazing. If you want to know more, is there anything else you would like to tell us about your work that share with the audience today?
No, that was lovely what you shared. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Kimberly, for being here today. And thank you, audience or participants, for being a part of this gathering and being part of the movement of birthing in a new earth. So take care and see you soon. Bye.